Hello, welcome back to Madrona's Pulse Teachings. I'm Iris, and it is time to chat about Mercury Retrograde. Final Mercury Retrograde of 2025. This is a big one. There's no other way to say it. I find the energy of this Mercury Retrograde absolutely freaking gorgeous. Like, I can't even begin, though I will begin, because that's what this video is about, is why I'm going to try and dispel some myths about Mercury retrograde, especially a Mercury retrograde that's asking us to go into our own underworld, because that is what Scorpio is, and our shared underworld with intimate partners and friends. And, you know, why is it so big? Because it's talking to everything. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, is talking to everything. It starts on November 9th. It goes until November 29th. So we're moving through the rest of November. It comes after the Taurus Full Moon. I'm filming this on the Taurus Full Moon. A note about filming. I've tried to film this video for you several times, and I find that funny, because I'm talking about Mercury retrograde and slowing down and listening to what's wanting to be here. And what's so interesting is that I really wanted to film this with the elements, but the elements are loud right now. Like, it is so windy here. It's kind of chilly in this little room I'm in. The light is coming in and out. The ocean is really loud. And I was like, nah, I can't do that. So I kept trying to film inside, and it was just not working. So I was like, you know what? Taurus Full Moon, I hear you. We're going to just let the elements do their thing with us and weave in and out of the message and be their own message, which is ultimately what this Mercury retrograde, especially because it is coming just after a Taurus Full Moon and as Uranus re-enters Taurus, that is one of the messages of this Mercury retrograde, is to listen to what we are co-creating with. And part of the reason why Mercury retrograde gets dumped on by pop astrology and our current mediascapes is because it asks us to get out of our ego's grasp for control, always. That is always what Mercury retrograde is asking. And that ask is part of its cycle with the sun, because Mercury retrograde is about its cycle with the sun. And there is nothing inherently bad or evil about a Mercury retrograde. And there is nothing inherently evil about the underworlds that Scorpio brings us into. And the moment we make a statement like Scorpio is fill in the blank with something that is extremely negative, anyone that says that, you're saying that about yourself because you have Scorpio in you. Anytime we make a judgment about a sign that's usually based on limited number of people we've interacted with that oftentimes have their sun in a sign, and I hate to be the dispeller of myths around what horoscope astrology has done in the modern world, which is so recent in the history of astrology, like we're talking 100 years versus thousands. The energy that most likely we've interacted with is not, firstly, if it's an intimate relationship, it's their moon, it's their Pluto. There's so much going on in a complicated chart, and yet we embody every single sign. It doesn't matter if you have an empty house, if you have placements, it's part of us. And so evolutionary astrology is about working with the emergence of a co-creative consciousness that we're awakening to, that we're growing into, that is part of our soul's healing, that is part of this life's healing. And Mercury retrograde is part of that. And Scorpio is a big part of that, especially being linked to Pluto, which is about the soul's transformation and evolution. And this Mercury retrograde, coming back to the focus, is absolutely part of that. Okay, now let's just do some of, this is why it's so big, okay? Mercury will station retrograde at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. It will move back from our perspective on Earth. Mercury is still moving direct. This is about our perspective, our embodied perspective and experience. It will conjunct Mars in Sagittarius, in those first few degrees of Sagittarius. Then it will move back into Scorpio. It comes into 29 degrees of Scorpio, and it's opposite of Uranus, who just went back into 29 degrees of Taurus. It is trine Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces. Then it conjuncts our new moon. 2 weeks from our full moon, we have our new moon at 28 degrees of Scorpio as we're closing out Scorpio season. Mercury retrograde is conjunct while it's trining Neptune opposite Uranus and coming into its trine with Taurus. It's trine with Jupiter, bringing that grand water trine with the sun and Mercury retrograde. Then it keeps moving. It's going to head back to 20 degrees of Scorpio. And on that journey, it's going to conjunct Venus, who has entered into Scorpio just after our Taurus full moon. And then Mercury will station direct, and it will help us integrate everything that it's churned up for our psyche to witness and experience and see. Okay? And part of this is, Mercury came into Sag. Mars is in Sag. Part of the intensity of the water trine that we ended October with and entered November with, and I am with folks who have been talking about how challenging at times that water trine has been. Part of that was because of Mars, and Mars is now in Sag. Mars is moving forward. Now, what that water trine was first doing was wanting us to come into watery ways of being. And this itself is a challenge to all of us who have in one way or another been impacted by the social world, by mainstream culture, by what in cultural theory is called dominator culture. Because we are conditioned to not embody and create meaning with our watery ways of being. And this has gotten more intense with the rise of social media, with the domination of social media as the medium of information making. And watery ways of being, they slow us down. They ask us to feel. They ask us to recognize that knowing doesn't come from a concrete understanding that it just put in a box and it's finalized. Water says you're never done knowing. You're never done understanding. The past is always changing the present, and the present is always changing the past, and time is not linear. It asks us to gain emotional presence and to let emotion be part of how we intuit and understand ourselves and our journey. And it's also very big for healing. But the piece is that watery ways of knowing, they don't fit into the language of analysis. They don't fit into the neat nailed sentences, which is a quote from Jeanette Winterson of narrative, that just make it all seem perfect. The light is intense, you can't really see the waves, but every now and then, that blob of white is moving. That's the waves. That water is powerful. And it can go from such a gentle service to a rising of a wave, and that is our internal world. And so depending how much of a practice we have of every day making meaning with our watery ways of being, and it doesn't matter if you have placements in water or not, water is in all of us. And it's a practice. Embodied astrology, archetypal astrology, is a practice. It is never perfected. It is never fully grasped. It is an ongoing journey and discovery, and it's beautiful in that. But that's a very different way of being and knowing and approaching life than what most of us are conditioned, which is to perform perfection, perform expertise, perform I am the best, right? To perform in that competitive nature that's always linked to profit, that's always linked to status. And water just That's not how it rolls, okay? And this is happening on the tides of a Taurus full moon. As Uranus is going back into Taurus, that Mercury retrograde is going to talk to that Taurus at a Scorpio new moon. That Taurus is part of this. It's part of the messages. And this is about radical embodiment. It is about reclaiming. This is our last work with Uranus and Taurus, to reclaim earthy, witchy ways that are an intrinsic belonging because of how our body sings with the ecosystems we are part of, how our body sang with the womb that we developed in, that resonance is part of our own memory. It is about ways of knowing that mainstream society does not honor, and many do not even know exist. And so, but they come up because they're part of us. We got a lot of water in our body. It comes up. It wants to speak. Those waves rise. And many of us get taught that healing is actually shutting them down. That healing is trying to convert them into an analytical understanding of myself, when really my experiences burst any box that someone wants to put me in, let alone when I am taught to put myself in boxes. They can be useful for organizing a sense and approach to the self, but the experience of embodiment is a constant shifting of self. It is a constant shifting of self-understanding. And it is always in relationship to my environment. And Taurus is about my embodied relationship that is an inherent belonging in the body. And that's where self-worth comes. Taurus reclaimed, especially in its witchy depths, is about an inherent worth that is never attached to materialism, consumerism, capitalism. That destroys the knowledge that Taurus gifts us with, and it destroys the inherent sense of safety and security that working with Taurus and embodying Taurus energy brings. And Uranus moves into Taurus for the last time, and Mercury is going to talk with it in this retrograde, suggesting that part of understanding and intuiting and healing our own inner depths and wounds is allowing ourselves to be connected to Earth, to speak with Earth, not to control it, not to exploit it, but to journey along with it and to hear the messages. That shaking hummingbird feeder, the light coming in, things that people would say, she didn't make a good video, it's got distraction, it has a different light, it has etc. She's in front of a window. Never. Firstly, it's not how I roll, so if that's all you want, you probably might want to go listen to another astrologer. Because nature is communicating, right? It is always communicating with us. And when we allow ourselves to open to that communication, which speaks through the body, and then the body often speaks through other ways of knowing, which are beautifully mediated through aesthetic intervention. Well, we're just living in a different world of meaning making. We're just living in a different world of identity, of success. And this Mercury retrograde wants to help you reevaluate your own internal ways of being, your own histories of understanding yourself, of understanding your own wounds, especially the wounds that come from intimacy. That is usually seated in early relationships and family, first socializations, early partnerships, patterns that are watery. And if we haven't been taught how to work with our water, then we just repress it and repress it. But this is the thing about water energy and watery ways of knowing, and it's why I, as someone who has worked in feminist trauma theory for my entire adult life, who has sat in circle with survivors, who is a survivor of extreme violence, I do not work with normalized ideas of shadow work for many reasons. Firstly, often what's been silenced, especially turned into our own mechanism of silencing, internalized, is often being perpetuated by the everyday media narratives that we consume, that we can't help but consume. And if you think of this on the mass media level, like what's happened, influencer culture is feeding ideas that normal life is being on vacation, that the life to grasp after is to be on vacation wearing a bathing suit that costs however much, eating that meal that costs however much, where actually that person is getting paid and wearing that for free and exploiting all of it. And what folks don't understand is that our attention is the new economy. And giving attention is profiting most of the capitalist industry of mainstream advertising that so many people say they are against. And yet when we follow certain people, when we follow certain lifestyles that are exploiting a projected idea of norm that keeps a vast separation of class, both in the public imagination, embodied experience, and in the economic reality, that's how the media works. And so that normalized idea of identity, that teaches us unconsciously that those parts of ourselves that don't fit in that, especially youth, that they're bad, that they're wrong. Add on to that the layering of messages we receive when we survive trauma that is usually mixed between micro and macro levels, micro being family, relationship, macro being words like patriarchy and internalized patriarchy, which doesn't get talked about enough, and the way that trickles into the micro. Add it all together, and we are not acknowledging our watery depths. And we are pushing it away. And yet they're always surging. They're always speaking. This is what implicit body speak is. And usually it's not having to look at the parts of ourselves that are dark, that we hate, that we don't like. It's allowing ourselves to love our whole self. Because we always know what we've survived, even if it's not in conscious, cognitive memory. It's in the body, it's in the heart, it's with us in dream, it's with us in the quiet moments, it's soothed by nature, it's reflected by nature, as is our courageous spirit. And when we approach the whole self with love, it's a different orientation. And at its core, Scorpio is about love. It is about a raw, naked vulnerability of finding power with another human being that is not exploiting one's vulnerability, that is not exploiting anything, that is sitting in the sweet exchange of intimacy. And that is hard, messy work, especially when we are not given representations of what that embodied emotional, spiritual journey actually looks like. And so we get all our wounds and desires for love all entangled in watery messes, and Scorpio acts out of fear, and it tries to control, or it tries to protect, or it tries to sting when it thinks it's being hurt. And that's just the fear drive. And Mercury Retrograde is a gorgeous time, especially when it's talking with messages from everyone, to approach whatever's coming up with love and compassion and understanding, even if we don't cognitively understand what the heck is going on. But we know it's Mercury retrograde, and we know if something is coming up or things are not working out, how can I slow down? You know, it's like in the classic Mercury retrograde when we're trying to film a video and it's just not working. Or trying to get that thing in to work, or fill in the blank, right? And our ego comes up and our idea of what's supposed to happen and our plan, and it goes like this, and then we get upset. But if we sidestep And we just say, okay, this is happening. And we step back and we listen to the body. What's the body saying? Is the body actually saying, wow, I really didn't want to do that? Wow, I would really love another hour to prepare myself. I'll try and see if Zoom is working then. Wow, I really wanted to do that and I'm disappointed, but I know that I have no control over this. So rather than get myself more worked up, I'm just going to breathe and see what emerges. There's infinite messages that the body is going to share, but we have to be willing to surrender our grasp at control and just be with. And Uranus is in Taurus. The body is speaking. The body is waking up. And that awakening is able to communicate through Mercury Retrograde, especially as we come into the next lunation with our Scorpio New Moon. So there is nothing to be fearful of, because anything that's emerging is from you. It's yourself. And if we approach the self with like, oh, this is that bad part. Oh, this is that thing I should be shamed for. Oh, this is that thing that's deficient. We've already othered ourselves from ourself. And Taurus Full Moon is about how we are already worthy, because we're not judging ourselves based on any external false narrative of worthiness or perfection that's really just a product of a power over ideology. We are knowing our worth comes because we feel embodied belonging. And it can't be manufactured, and it can't be given to us from someone else. But it can be so supported from others witnessing and holding space for us to feel our connection. And the earth is always there supporting, because we're always connected to it. And that is the Taurus archetype. And there is just so much belonging. And it's like Taurus is opposite Scorpio. That's the belonging that Scorpio is always integrating in order to love more authentically, in a more embodied way. And so ultimately, how can this Mercury retrograde support us on our journeys of self-love of life, of love of another human being? How can it support us on healing those wounds that we've been taught and continue to be taught to shame ourselves for, because they make us not look like something that is fake, like something that has been curated to make a small group of people a lot of money? It's irrational. And that is called rational in our society. Whereas those feeling into their body how it's affected by the tide, whereas us in our witchy ways, that's a real rationality, because it's embodied, it's integrated, and it doesn't come out of an ideology of violence and power over. And there's so much healing to happen here. And it does, however, ask us to slow down. The rest of 2025, there is forward movement, but it's forward movement that comes in a non-linearity of time. So you can work out that paradox for yourself, and just allowing it and just being curious. And if the tough emotions are coming up, then we soothe and we take care, and we remember that we're human and we're not supposed to be performing that idea of human. Like, that's the old paradigm. Sun, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, they are breaking that down so that we can create more authentic communities, ways of being. We can flourish in a relationship, and we can flourish as individuating selves in this plane, connecting with the beauty that is always here and has a scope that can hold grief, all of it. And I've talked a lot in other videos, like the astrology of the end of this year into 2026. It also brings up grief, and grief lives also in Scorpio, but it's really big in the Pisces energy. And so if grief is rising, if waves of grief are rising, that deserves to be honored with love, which means you deserve to be honored with love and care and not pushing it away, just allowing and seeing what surprises come along the way. So we will check in with Mercury Retrograde in Scorpio as we're actually in it. But here is a first taste at this gorgeous energy we're coming into. Full moon blessings, because I'm filming this like just a few hours after the full moon, and we'll see you soon. Bye.